Thank you. Well, and welcome everyone to this fourth academy in our ongoing effort to move all the functionality of the CAPI manager into the online manager. So we have one manager for Nfield. Said this is already the fourth academy on this subject, so I will not repeat things that we already discussed in the previous 3 academies. And that means that we can probably keep this academy to half an hour. Now, what will we exactly talk about? There will be a very brief introduction on why we are merging. But that is something where I talked in depth about in the first of these merge academies. So I will glance over that. Most time we'll spend with a demo to show you what actually we will be releasing into the Nfield Manager this time, and a short look on the timetable when we will do the next steps. In the demo, I will add one thing in the demo that has nothing to do with the manager, but with the CAPI client. I will talk about that once we are in the demo. So a very short recap on what it exactly is what we are doing. Currently, we have 2 managers, one CAPI manager, which you are all familiar with, and a separate online manager. That is very confusing to have 2 managers for basically one in the same project, one in the same product. That's Nfield. So we decided to merge those 2 managers into one. And we will do that by moving all the CAPI functionality into the online manager. That means that from now onward, the online manager will be known as the Nfield manager, the CAPI manager as the classic manager. Why merge? Well, I already touched on that. It's confusing to have 2 managers for one product. It's expensive for us because we need to test everything. There are actually features missing from the classic manager, like a view on sample, that are available in the Nfield manager. And instead of building that into the classic manager, it's much easier for us to simply merge the classic manager with the online manager. Now, how will this merge take place? Well, all CAPI functionality will be merged with the Nfield manager, one scenario at a time. Now, what are the scenarios? The basic surveys that we already have completely merged with the new manager. We have already turned off this scenario in the classic manager. If you want details on that one, the previous academy, the previous merge academy, so that was number 3, that completely handled the basic surveys. Next step would then be the surveys with sampling points and quota, and that is the step that we are taking today. And the final steps will be to merge the surveys with sampling points and addresses, and the surveys with sampling points, addresses, and quota. The scenarios will be closed in the classic managers when they are introduced in the Nfield manager and when we feel that they are stable enough in the Nfield manager to close the scenarios. What will be merged? All functionality of the classic manager will be merged, and most of the functionality of the Nfield tool will move to the Nfield manager. You will actually see some of that functionality of the Nfield tool in the current demo that now has been moved to the manager. One last reminder where you can find this Nfield manager. While I'm not going to read those links, these are the 4 different links for the 4 different regions where you can find this online manager. You use the same login to the Nfield manager as you use for the CAPI manager. So with that, let's step into the demo. Are there any questions at this point, Art?
No questions so far.
Okay, then we'll go to the demo. So This is the online manager, or the Nfield Manager as it is called from now on. How this exactly functions, we talk about this in the first merge academy. So if you have any doubts about that, I will refer you to that academy. Let's simply create a survey and let's see what we have added. So click create. I can choose between online and CAPI surveys because my test domain has a license for both online and CAPI. If you only have a CAPI license, you will only see CAPI here. Let's give it a name. First survey I will create a sample points manual. There's a survey group here. You can create in the Nfield Manager your surveys into group if you are using different groups, and you can organize your users in groups, and your user will then only see those surveys that actually match the group he has been assigned to. And this has completely been explained in the previous academy. So again, if you have any doubts about this, look in the previous academy. This is actually a functionality that is not present in the Classic Manager. So that is already one nice thing that you get by simply moving from the Classic Manager to the Nfield Manager. So CAPI, create a survey. As you noticed, I did not have to choose what type of survey I am creating, like you do in the Classic Manager, and that is because we have moved that choice, what sort of survey you want to put, where it makes more sense, because the type of survey is dictated by how you are using your sample and how you are assigning things. So we actually have moved that to that part where you actually choose what sort of sample and what sort of assignment you are using. These are the basic surveys. As said, we will not talk about these today. That was the topic of the previous Merge Academy. This is the part that we are editing today. To be able to use those sampling points, I need to have at least a target. So to create that target, I click on Configure Quota, I click Set Target, and I give it a target, save it, and if I now go back to Sample and Assignment, you see I can actually choose now sampling points with quota, because I have fulfilled the one requirement that there needs to be a survey target. So click on that one, save it, and then at the top here, you actually see that we have a new entry here, sampling points. If I click on that one, gets me to the sampling points, and I can either upload a file or I can start adding sampling points manual. For the first survey, we will do this manual. So I will click on add a sampling point. Again, this is a functionality that is not available in the Classic Manager, where you can only create those sample points by downloading them through the Nfield Manager, uploading them through the Nfield Manager. But in this new interface, you actually can create those sample points manual if you want to. So need a ID for that sample point. Simply use sample point 1. Need to give it a name. A target. This is the target of the sample point. So let's give it a target 50. A group ID. I will not get into that group ID. We have an academy which handles more generally on the different sorts of CAPI sampling, and that talks about that group ID. So if you have any questions about that group ID, please refer to that academy. And a fieldwork office. I am actually using fieldwork offices, which means that I have to choose a fieldwork office. I cannot leave this empty. Well, I could leave it empty. It will still create that sample point, but if I then start assigning, there is no one to assign to, because I am using fieldwork offices. So it will start matching this sample point with the interviewers that are also part of that fieldwork office. And for that reason, all my sample points actually have to have a fieldwork office. They cannot be empty, or my list of assignments will be empty. So save this. And there we have our sample point. Now, for those of you with a long memory, you might remember that in one of the previous academies on those merge managers, we already talked once about the sampling points with or without quota. We took one, we asked you for feedback. You gave us a lot of feedback. And one of that feedback was about how we are assigning interviewers to that sample point. The one route that we had on our previous attempt was when you go to interviewers, you can click on assign some interviewers, and we can click on survey. Let's click on this interviewer. I can click assign, and I will get a list of all the sample points that this interviewer can be assigned to. This interviewer belongs to the Fieldwork Office Amsterdam, so I will see this one because this is from the Fieldwork Office in Amsterdam. I can assign. If there were multiple sample points that were available, I would see all of those sample points, and I could assign all of those sample points at once, or create a filter where I can filter out the exact 1 or 2 sample points that I want to assign to this interviewer. So that is one route to assigning that was already possible in our previous attempt. But as some of you, I think, quite rightly said, my business is not supplying work to interviewers. My business is doing surveys. So my start point is actually not interviewers. I want my start point to be sampling points. And that route was not possible, but that route we have added now. So if you go to sampling points, you open sample points, you can click assign here, and you get an overview of all the interviewers that actually are available to assign to this one sample point. So we now have 2 work processes where you can assign interviewers to sample points. You can start with interviewers, or you can start with sample points. Okay, let's take one step back and let's actually upload a survey using a file, because then we have at least more than one sample point in an easy way in there. So let's do upload SP, let's call it that. Still the default, still CAPI, create sample and assignments. Okay, sample and assignments. Configure quota. My sample, the file I'm going to upload actually uses targets, does not only use a target, it actually uses quota. So I need to create that quota variable. That quota frame needs to exist before I start uploading it, or it will refuse the upload. And it needs to match the exact quotas I'm using in that sample point file too. So let's create this frame. We're using the same interface as we are using for this in for the online manager. So it has 2 variables, gender, age, age, young and old. Oh, no, old. That's it. A very nice feature of the new Nfield Manager, that if you want to create, if you want to nest those variables, it's very easy by simply clicking, by simply shifting this one, and now we have nested age with gender. The next step would be to create targets. I can leave this empty. I need to have a total target. I could actually leave those targets all empty. I will do that for now, just to save some time, because this is sample point with quota. So the real definition, the real target definition of those quota cells that actually have a meaning when you are interviewing are on sample point level and not on server level. So I could leave this alone. I could leave this empty on server level, and I will for now. So save this one. We'll go back to sample and assignments. Choose sampling points with quota. Save that one. Open the sampling point tab, and this time I will simply upload a file. The file is the same format as you are using in the Nfield tool. I could also create a template for that file by simply downloading a template, and that will give me an empty Excel file here with all the columns that needs to be filled, including all the quota cells that needs to be filled with the correct heading here, so it can be connected to the correct cells. So that's a very nice and easy way to create a template. I already created a file, so I will simply pick it up and drop it here. And there we are. 4 have been inserted. So we have 4 sample point files belonging to either the fieldwork office Amsterdam or The Hague. Assigning interviewers, exactly the same as with manual. I can open this one, click assign, create a filter here, and let's assign this to interviewing that have an F in their name. That would be 2, and I click on assign, and that's it. I have now 2 assigned interviewers to this one. If I only want to assign it to 1, I simply need to create my filter a little bit with more detail, and that will only return the 1 interviewer. Okay. So assigning, if I want to know which interviewers are exactly assigned, I can click on assigned interviewers, and it will tell me which of those interviewers are assigned. If I want to know the assigned quota, here is a very nice feature, one that is missing from the Classic Manager. If I click on assigned quota without having a sample point, selected, I actually get an overview of the complete of all the targets that have been uploaded in all those sample points. So this is a complete overview of all the targets of those 4 sample points combined. This is completely missing from the Classic Manager. I think that this overview alone already makes it worth your while to switch to this interface. Because now you can actually see what you have uploaded in total. And if I would have supplied survey target, I could also check how that relates to the actual survey targets. If I want to look at the actual quota of a sample point, it's simple, open the sample point, click on assign quota, and I see the quota of this actual sample point. Same repeats if I go into interviewers. If I open an interviewer, I can see to which sample point this interviewer has been assigned, which for this interviewer is only the 1. I could click on the assigned quota. That will only give me an overview of the number of interviews that this interviewer did for this sample point. It does not give you the target, because remember, this is sample point with quota, so the quota actually does not belong to this one interviewer. It belongs to the sample point. And there are 2 interviewers on the sample point. Okay. Any questions at this point, Art?
Yes, a question came in and it reads, under what circumstances is it possible to delete a sampling point? Somehow I had problems recently to delete a sampling point which has just been uploaded, not even assigned to an interviewer.
I haven't tested that, so I would say that you can no longer certainly delete a sample point if you have assignments. And even if you remove your assignments, you could probably not delete a sample point. And if you have already worked on that sample point. If I go, let's actually see if we can delete that sample point. This one. Now this one has assignments, so I cannot delete it. This one does not have assignments, so it could be deleted. So it could be deleted. If this is different for you, yeah, well, you should contact the help desk because this is how it is. This is how it is supposed to work. As long as you don't have assignments, you can delete that sample points.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, it may even relate to the old Classic Manager, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I have another question. You had the sampling point target total mean that I could get a total of 240 completes?
Yeah. No, because the limit, the limiting point here is on the targets.
Yeah.
That's the limiting point is on the sample points. Sorry. So as soon as you fire a strat command, it is checking the sample point totals and not the survey totals. The survey totals are merely there for display. It's the sample point targets that matter.
So you can get 240 completes.
If you upload 4 sample points and each have 60, yeah, you get 240 completes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions for now.
Okay, then let's get into the second part of this. Well, let's first go to setup surveys. Actually upload the script. Save this one. Publish. Start the survey. So I should be able to download this on a CAPI manager, on a CAPI client. So let's take a look at the CAPI client. This is my device that I am now screening to my streaming to my screen. Let's sync. Reason why I'm showing this, the fact that we have moved the sample points from one manager to the other manager does not change the behavior in the client, but we have a separate thing going on, as I said, where we are actually also rewriting the interface of the CAPI client. That one is nearly ready to be released, but before doing that, we would really like to be sure that the new interface that we created does not have any bugs, and that the process that we have incorporated into that new client is actually usable for you. So this is the client. Let's see if we can see our survey, and our survey was upload SP. So yeah, here we see our survey. We can go to sample, etc., etc. But before doing anything further, this is the interface you are all used to. Let's take a look at that new interface. That is not something for which you need to download a new client. All you need to do for that is go to settings, diagnostics, And here on the button, you see user interface. You can click this button, use new user interface, and then your interface will be switched to that new user interface. This is not something that you should do in production because, as said, this is not production ready yet, but this is something that we would very much like you to do on your test devices at least once to check if the work process that has now been incorporated into this new UI is actually something that your interviewers could use. As you see, it looks a bit different. We have cards. If we go to the upload sample points here, open that one, you get a nice overview of how many successfuls are actually done, how many screened outs are done at this moment. I can open it. I have the 2 sample points that I have assigned to this one interviewer. I can open that sample point. It will synchronize the stats, so I am sure that I have the correct quotas here. I can open the gender here, and that will give me the quota. So again, this looks a bit different than what you are used to normally. Start this interview, and this looks exactly the same as you are used to. This is governed by the script. So we have 1, and it returns. That synchronizes the stats, and it returns. So this is something that we would really like you to test on your test devices. If you want to be more involved than only taking a look at that, I will tell you shortly how you can get more involved. You can always switch back. So by simply going again to settings, diagnostics, and I can switch back to the old interface. So this is not something that cannot be undone. You can always switch back to the old interface until the moment where we actually decide, okay, this new interface is ready and we want it out and then we will switch everyone to that new interface, and you cannot switch back there. So before we do that, please check this. If you have any instructions, written instructions where you instruct your interviewers on how to handle this interface, please check if those are still valid. If those are still valid for that new interface. If they aren't and you need time to rewrite this, please inform me so we can actually give you that time to rewrite this. Okay. One last thing. Let's take one last look on the one thing that we did, and that was sample points. Doesn't take very nice to I was signed out. It's because I didn't do much. And why? Yeah, I had my caps on. So upload sample points, set up sample and assignments, assigned interviewers, and as you can see here, 1 successful for me, and it still gives me an overview. No, that's not correct. It should give me an overview that this assignment is active, or at least for this one. Active, but not with possibly incomplete data because I did not do a full sync yet. Okay, let's return to the presentation. So that was the demo. Let's take a look at the timetable. The first thing is creating the sample points with quota that will be turned on for all domains on Monday at the latest. Probably it has been turned on for your domain already, because as I said, we did a previous attempt at releasing this, and for most of the domains, this had been turned on at that point. But if this has not been turned on for your domain, it will be turned on Monday at the latest. The next step is that we will change the API, that the API also creates those sampling points with quota in the new Nfield Manager tool. Currently, if you use the API and you create a sample point, it will be created in the Classic Manager. That is the next thing that we will move, and once that has been done, we will close down creating sample points in the Classic Manager. So you can then no longer create sample points with quota. You can then only create sample points with addresses. At this moment, I cannot give you a date when we will be doing this, because we still need to put this on our backlog. And then the last step is that we will move create sample points with addresses to the Nfield Manager. That is quite some time away at this point. Any final questions?
Yes. Somebody asked if the sampling points plus assignments import works via the upload tool.
Yeah. You can still use the upload tool to upload your sample points. You can still upload your assignments through the Nfield tool too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there were a couple of other questions, but that has been dealt with.
Okay.
So you can continue.
Good. Then the new CAPI UI, as said, we would very much like you to at least flip that interface once and see if it works on your devices, and if the work process there is clear for you and whatever, and to get an idea if you need to change some of your instructions to your interviewers. If you want to be more involved, we actually have a few instructions on what we would like you to test. So if you want to be more involved in that, please contact me, and we will set you up. If you have any remarks about that interface, again, drop me an email, and we will take that into consideration. And that was my last remark. So usual final remarks on these academies. Recordings of this session will be available later this week. The manuals are updated with the new interface. Next academy will be about survey metrics, probably in about a month time. There will be a fifth academy in our merge story that will deal with the CAPI web addresses. I put that in italics here because that is probably not the second academy that we will run, because that will be much later this year when that is ready.
Frank, there's a final question coming on.
Sure.
I'm not sure if he dealt with that in much detail this time. Will the CAPI projects automatically migrate, or do you need to do this yourself?
Yeah, that's a good point. They will not automatically migrate. If we go to my overview here, there actually is a point here. You see to be migrated. So there is still a migrated button, a migrate button for all those surveys that you created in the Classic Manager. You have to migrate these yourself if you want to have those surveys migrated from the Classic Manager to the Nfield Manager. This is also a way, if you are even creating, if you are using the API, to create surveys, and you still want to use this interface to actually do your field work, and I can very well imagine that you would want to, because as demo, there is much more overview on those sample points here than there is in the classic manager. That simply means go here and migrate that survey, and it will be available in the Nfield Manager.
Thanks, Frank. And there was another final question. Are there stipulated dates for the migration of projects from the old platform to the new one?
No. We don't have dates at this moment, as said. It's depending on when we have time to do the API and when we are ready with the API, and then we'll probably give you even a few more times to check that. And only at that point we will consider actually closing down that scenario, and then you have to migrate. But that's still quite some time away.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Those are all the questions.
Okay. Then we are at the end. Indeed, a little more than half an hour. So thank you for joining, and I'll talk to you next time about the survey metrics. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.